opposition doesn't get about foreign policy is exactly what Kate tells you, that sometimes presidents inherit really, really bad situations. The way to then judge whether or not they've done a good job or a bad job is to say, have they made the best of this bad situation? Not that has the US done something, has something really bad happened that the US could have prevented. That would be a reason to say that the US has failed. But we don't think that's been the case. We don't think the opposition is actually engaged with the comparativeness debate, which is to say that they have to prove that in any case that they point out, i.e. all of their examples about Iraq and Syria and all the rest of that, they have to give us a viable alternative that Obama could have done in order to have done something better. Because otherwise, they're not actually providing us with a real thing that says that Obama could have done something better and hence he's done more harm than good. I think that's fundamentally the problem in their case today. I'm going to give you 3 points of rebuttal before I go into my substantive about Obama advancing American interests and diplomatic interests. And we're going to look at, firstly, on intervention. Has he intervened where he needed to? And was this the correct strategy in every single case, what opposition seems to think? Secondly, on whether he's harmed or helped them, diplomatic credibility, that sort of stuff. And finally, no thank you, we're going to look at the pivot to Asia and why this is actually such an important thing about the role of America in the world and something that they fail to recognize on their side. So firstly, on the idea of interventions and that sort of thing. So let's just blow this Iraq example out of the water entirely, right? What is the situation in Iraq before Obama gets in, right? So firstly, we say that American troops are only stationed in the capital of Baghdad, right? They are not in the entirety of the country in which ISIS held lots and lots of control now. Secondly, Obama is facing a hostile Congress that wants to oppose him at every single turn for the just strategy of opposing him because they think, no thank you, it weakens his political power. But finally, we tell you that he's facing an existing anti-West sentiment that's only been growing for decades and decades since the US has been involved in the Middle East, which means that he's unable to form any sort of government entirely. Why does this mean that the options that he chose were the best options in that situation? We'll tell you 3 things. Number 1, no thank you. We tell you that he had no other option in order to stop ISIS, right? We tell you that the fact that he was only in the capital means that any military assistance he could have given was going to be largely, no thank you, something that's symbolic, right? Which is to say, he was going to leave a couple thousand troops, which is exactly the agreement they were talking about, right? What that means is, you get all of the harms of the US sitting in your country and seemingly occupying your country, and ISIS points to that and says, join us so we can kick these guys out, right? I think that means you get a worse ISIS on their side. But also, ladies and gentlemen, no thank you, they can't actually do anything to stop ISIS, right? Especially when ISIS became so strong in the other parts of the country that the US had no influence over. So we tell you he had no viable alternative, which is what the opposition has to give us to prove that Obama has done more harm than good. No thank you. But finally, we tell you that he had no option to create a stable government that also had US intervention, right? Why is this the case? Because anti-West sentiment means that any government that Obama puts in place is going to be seen as a crony government that is entirely owned by the West. What this means is, once again, ISIS uses this rhetoric and overthrows this government and becomes even stronger in the meanwhile. We think their side has to contend with the imperative, with the comparative of having a worse ISIS fueled by anti-West sentiment and the Obama also having to lose face because all of the Americans got totally destroyed because they left 2,000 troops to deal with a massive force. So we tell you, ladies and gentlemen, Obama could not have stopped ISIS. He did the best thing that he could in withdrawing at the time that he did. That example, which essentially, ladies and gentlemen, was all they were doing in Prop 1, loses them, has lost and been totally dealt with. But let's deal with the better conception of the argument, right? The idea Obama should have left at some other point, right? We don't think that it's fair to say that Obama hasn't been doing anything in the interim, right? Because we think that when they tell you about technical assistance and that sort of stuff that he shouldn't have been providing, this is exactly what we do already, right? We already support the Iraqi government with technical assistance to help fight ISIS. These are things that we can do on our side, and we do already. We think insofar as Obama has done the measures that the proposition want to support, we tell you he's done a great thing, and the opposition lose based on their own burden that they set on their side. No, thank you. On to the second idea, ladies and gentlemen, about whether Obama has used diplomacy and credibility well, right? We think we need to look at a couple things here. So firstly, let's deal with this idea of Iran comprehensively, right? Because no, Mr. Speaker, that they didn't give you analysis as to why Iran was a specifically bad thing. They just told you it harmed the allies, specifically Israel. Let's look at this, right? We tell you that Israel is the primary beneficiary of having a non-nuclear Iran. Why? Because in the case that they had a nuclear Iran, they would have a massive, a deterrent threat to stop Israel exercising its power, but also it means that Israel is just in, way more danger when Iran is a country that is openly committed to destroying them. What does this mean? It means that even though, like, Benjamin Netanyahu could be seen to openly support the Americans in looking for a non-nuclear Iran, it means that they ultimately wanted this behind the scenes, right? Because no, ladies and gentlemen, they're the ones that needed it the most, right? I'll tell you what this means is, Obama was willing to take the sacrifice of looking bad in front of his allies, out in the open, for a necessary and good strategic goal that helped both sides in the conflict. We'll tell you this is diplomacy done well and really, really good on their side. But no, thank you. Just as a line, we tell you that they have to accept all the harms, all the benefits of the LGBTQ community, which they consider on their side. Even if we consider it's a minor point, they accept that as a good in and of itself. No, thank you. But finally, ladies and gentlemen, on Syria, and this will be the last point that I get to, they told us that he had 1,500 people died of chemical weapons and Obama did nothing, which is empirically false because Obama was the one who decided to negotiate with Sergei Lavrov and get these chemical weapons removed in the first place. No, thank you. We think what this means is Obama made the correct decision in Syria using diplomacy in the correct way to get rid of chemical weapons. But finally, we tell you that if they want to support a blanket invasion of Syria, they need to give us an exit strategy, tell us how you're going to get the capital to stay in the country and not just do a half job and leave out like they had to do in other countries. Tell us how the US public was ever going to support another new war. I'll take you now.
Yeah. So when you talk about how Israel went behind the scenes, unless Team UAE was actually listening into what was happening behind the scenes, we see this as a complete assumption.
Okay, so firstly, we gave you reasoning as to why Israel would want this behind the scenes, right? We're not just telling you Israel wants this behind the scenes and no reasoning. We gave you lots of reasoning on that. They need to engage with the reasoning, not just with the idea that it might be an assumption. On to my substantive in today's debate about how Obama has advanced American interests, right? So we tell you that although the US has a responsibility to the rest of the world in terms of helping them, we think ultimately it also has a responsibility to its own citizens to help them to advance their own interests. We think it's done this in two ways. Firstly, in terms of global warming. Secondly, in terms of bolstering diplomatic influence. Firstly, we tell you on global warming. It's been incredibly important that America has been able to get China and India to the table on global warming. We tell you his Paris commitment was the only way in which we could get faster, more meaningful action towards global warming. Why is this so important? Because unless India and China stop using up all the coal in the world and destroying the planet, this is not going to happen and not going to change. We'll tell you that this is massive impacts on our side. They catch way down like they did the LGBTQ point. Because we tell you that when sea levels rise, when maritime ecosystems are destroyed, and when storms like Hurricane Sandy become incredibly frequent, thousands and thousands of people die, and loads of US interests and the world's interests are destroyed. We think they need to deal with Obama's work towards climate change. But lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we look at Obama bolstering diplomatic influence. We tell you that the idea that he's made ties with India, Cuba, and Iran means that America is now able to avert conflict instead of just engaging directly as the opposition wants to support in every single case. I'll tell you, a more diplomatic America saves millions of people, saves millions of dollars, and helps create a more stable world. Ladies and gentlemen, the opposition never engage in the comparative. They never tell you what it means to do more harm than good. We gave you a realistic conception of that. That's why we win this debate.
Yeah.